Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio.
Suze Cooper is out today, and so I am just so thrilled to have two awesome guest co-hosts, Morgan Evans and Michael Sterling. Thank you both so much for joining me today and taking Suze's place.
Oh, very happy to be here. I always look forward to this room, even just listening from the audience when that's all I can do or need to do. But I mean, yeah, this is on my calendar every week.
Oh, you're so kind.
All Things Audio. So I'm happy to be here. I appreciate and I'm honored by the request to be a co-host.
Yeah, and you always have so much to share when you just come on as a listener. And Morgan, you too. Morgan, you always come on every week and have so much to talk about with the latest with Clubhouse and some of the other platforms, Reddit, when we talk about those things. So you really stay on top of those. And again, that led you to being one of our guest co-hosts, just from you being an active participant and always having great stuff to talk about. So thank you so much for being here today. We're going to dive right in. We're going to start with some Spaces news. If you're new to this room, I put stuff in the nest for you to see as we move along here, so you can see the different tweets that we're talking about. If you're listening to the podcast version, we always make sure these tweets are in the show notes as well. So first up, Spaces announced this week that this clipping feature on mobile, you see at the bottom, the little scissors. You've probably seen that for a while because we've had that available for iOS and Android for a little bit. Some of us hosts have had it longer. I've had it for quite some time. But now it's available on the web. I am super excited. Anything that can happen on the web for Spaces, I'm all for. Like we've been hearing that we're going to be able to start hosting from the web soon in Spaces, which I'm super excited about. We've talked about that already here before in the recent weeks. But what do you guys think about this clipping feature? I have mixed opinions about it, but I want to hear from you guys. Michael, let's start with you first. What are your thoughts about clipping? Have you been using it? Like, have you had it for a while like me and been testing it and trying it out? And what do you think about it being available on the web?
Yeah, I have not tried it on the web. I have tried it on the app a couple of times. Like I've actually used it, I think last week in your room. I clipped something and shared that. And the idea, I think, is a great one. And Clubhouse has its own clipping feature. We can talk about it if you want. But the way that the clips are implemented on Twitter is just very nonplussing to me. And it's kind of clunky. And I know for some people, the text of the captioning doesn't really work. The little waveform thing is just a little animation. It's not really real-time audio stuff, which, I'm an audio geek, so I notice things like that. So, if clipping is available and I hear something that is really profound, then I will clip it, but the bar has to be pretty high. And then I'm not even all that enthusiastic about it because the clip itself, what you get, I don't know, just nonplussing. I will leave it at that and pass the mic on.
Well, there's some third-party tools that do a much better job, I have to say. But thank you for sharing that. Morgan, what are your thoughts? Have you played around with the clipping feature?
I have. Yeah, so I had this fairly early, and I'm actually quite impressed with the technical implementation of this. The way that it's coded and links back to the space, the way that the captions work. And it's been good to see them develop this in public.
Yes, that is cool. That part is cool.
So it wasn't working so well at the very beginnings, but it looks like a lot of those kinks have been ironed out. As a kind of a general thought is, we've seen clipping in other platforms for a while, and I think they are very useful, but I would say that now it's settled down, they're not used a lot. So it's a good thing to have in the arsenal, but it doesn't really, I think, change the game to a great extent. But it's also kind of a matter of, in the early stages, hosts making a point of educating their listeners about it and encouraging the use of it. And some of that is also, it's maybe not clear in the early stages how they work exactly, or maybe how you listen to them when you see them on your timeline. So I know some people have asked about, there's a big there's a big play button, and if you tap on that, it takes you to the space, but they actually wanted to just listen to the audio of the clip. So these are all kind of good bits of feedback to go and test that now as a host and as a listener, and go to probably the Twitter Spaces official feedback community and suggest some ways that you think that it could be improved.
Right. Michael, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, like I understand the whole trust and safety issue with trying to tie the clip back to the space. If the space doesn't exist, the clip goes away. I get that. However, I'm going to lower my hand. I thought I was going to. Anyway, on Clubhouse for the clips, we get an MP4 video. It's a little square video. I think it's like 8 megabytes. You get images of the people who were in the room, of yourself, who was speaking, their name. There's a QR code people can scan to get to the recording of it. And those little video clips are shareable in lots and lots of places. They're also downloadable to your phone. So one of the things I do more than anything else with clips from Clubhouse is save sort of audio notes for myself from rooms where I want to go back or somebody gave me a compliment and I want to save that. I'll clip it or whatever. And so there's all these things you can do with clips on Clubhouse, and they're nicer looking. The design of them is nicer in most respects. It doesn't have the text, which I'll give that to Twitter. But with Twitter, it's just kind of this little audio-visual link back to the space on Twitter. That's all it can be. And there's not any sort of promotional anything to it, I guess. I don't know. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm glad they added this to the web, but I'm still having issues with it that are the same issues I've had on mobile. And you can see in the nest here that we've got one that David Gerbino, he said he made his first Spaces clip from desktop, and he shared that with us. I put it in the nest so y'all can see. But here's the thing. Yep, that's so cool that David did that. In my other tweet that's here in the nest, I talked about this yesterday, is that the only issue I'm having with this, whether it's web or mobile, I'm having the same issue with both, is when you're trying to play the clip back on the web, it's playing the entire space. It's not doing the clip. And I was having that issue with mobile for the longest time. So on mobile, I would create it on mobile, and then on mobile, you clearly could see that it would play it back. But on the web, it doesn't. It's going to just play the entire thing. But here's something else too that I noticed, that on the mobile version, if you're looking at David's right now on mobile, the play button will play the entire space. You have to tap anywhere but the play button, and that's not obvious, to get the 30-second clip. And that was the issue I had for quite some time before when I had this feature. And I thought certainly they fixed these issues now that it's available on the web, that it would be better. I even used the Spaces Research hashtag because that's the feedback hashtag that Twitter monitors. And I haven't heard anything from them. I was just curious, it's still, to me, it feels like it still needs work. Did y'all notice that?
Yeah, all? I mean, that's another nit I would pick with the clips. Is the little experience I have with them is it seems like there's no way to just have it start playing the clip from the beginning. I've only done it really on mobile, but you can unmute it and it'll unmute it wherever it is in the middle of the clip and just wait for it to come on right back around and start over again. So you know what the beginning of it was. So I don't know. I guess I'm in a gripey mood today about clips. So I'll just mute my mic and let Morgan speak.
Yes, I think these are implementation details that can be worked on. So there's the bigger picture as well. I think this is going to be very useful as Twitter, we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves here, but moves into other kinds of audio too. So we might talk about adding podcasts later on. And you can imagine a clipping tool being, I don't know if there's going to be a podcast player on Twitter or not, but being able to clip those as well would be very nice.
Yeah, there is actually, real fast, sort of related to that, there is an app called Picked Cherries, which does something like that with podcasts, where you can, if there's a segment of a podcast that you like, you can actually clip it and it'll show up on your profile in the app, and there's carousels. And so it's basically just an app of clips of podcasts to get people engaged in the different things. So maybe Twitter is going to do something like that too with podcasts.
It's possible. Yeah, for sure.
One last thought on that is, unlike let's say Clubhouse, where you're sharing a video file, if you clip a space on Twitter, you're basically sharing the space because people can tap on it and go back to the space or the recording. So it really is a way to encourage your listeners to share the space. Until now, they can tweet out the space card, but now they can also clip, which gives a bit more context.
Right, definitely. I'm going to put in the nest here. There was a reply from Cindy Lou saying that she finds the simplicity of spreading through news on Twitter to expand reach is a quick and efficient way to spread the word about the space, and that's kind of nice. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. I think my main issue with this clipping is that if it's not obvious how to listen to the clip, how are you going to get people to listen and to use it? And I was not using it because that's the issue I've always had with it. And it's like, well, I want people to be like, Michael, I've seen yours from Clubhouse. It's so obvious. It's just a clip. It's not going to go play the whole room. You don't have to make sure you tap in the right place to have the clip versus the whole room play back for you.
But you know what? There is an option in Clubhouse and through the app that if you share a clip, it can share, it actually copies the link to the entire room into your clipboard. And so if you wanted to create a tweet with a clip, you tap on the Twitter share part in iOS. I'm just going to use that because that's what I use. And then, the clip is there in a tweet as a little video clip. And then you paste the link in there. And then you can say, listen to this clip and then tap on the link to listen to the whole room if you're interested. So yeah, there's just more options with Clubhouse and Twitter's. Anyway, there I am. Mm-hmm.
Well, I hope it improves. And later when we open up the room to our listeners, if anybody wants to come chime in and share their thoughts on this, we definitely want to hear from you. Let's move on. Andrew Lyons had put out a tweet I found super interesting. He has that awesome tool called Spaces Dashboard. If you're not familiar, go to spacesdashboard.com. And he's been working on a new feature there where I don't think it's out yet. He has a YouTube video. The link is in this tweet where he's talking about this feature he's working on, where you're going to be able to search for tweets that were shared in the nest by domain. And so what I mean by that, let's say I'd be able to go in there and let's say I want to see if anybody's sharing tweets that have my articles, my MadelineSclar.com links in the tweets in the nest. I would be able to go in just from watching his video and how he was showing examples from what I could see of this. And if Andrew, I don't see Andrew here in the room live, but if he does show up, maybe he can later come talk about this with us. But I think it sounds to me like a really interesting way to see what kind of things people are sharing. Maybe you were reading an interesting article, you could take that URL and pop it in there to see who else was talking about this in Spaces because they shared the tweet that had that link in the nest. Does that make sense? I mean, I hope that's not sounding too techie.
Yeah. And actually, I was just thinking, who would want this? But then there's a lot of people I think who would, especially people who create blogs or news articles. They could do a search to find it, like The Verge. I like The Verge's articles. So The Verge could go there and they could see who is sharing our articles in their spaces on Twitter Spaces. And, maybe we need to follow those people and make new connections with them and so on. So, yeah, I could see lots of different possibilities for this.
Yes, I often do this with tweets and articles. So if there's an article I'm trying to research, I will search for that article on Twitter and see what people have been writing about it. And now I'll be able to see what people have actually been saying about it in a space.
Yeah, and just a little known feature in Twitter that would allow you to search by, say, a whole URL or just a .com. Let's say you have an article, or let's just say it was an article, TechCrunch or The Verge, whatever, and you want to see who else is tweeting this article. You take that URL, so you're in the browser, you see that article, grab that URL, put it into the search, just paste it into the search on Twitter, and it's going to show you all the tweets that have linked to that in a tweet. So super valuable. But yeah, I think this is really interesting, and kudos for Andrew. He's adding lots of really interesting features to the Spaces dashboard. Do either of y'all use that tool? Because I love it.
I have not dived much into it, but what little bit I have sort of looked around, it is impressive. And it is quite the toolkit for people who do Twitter Spaces, or who, I mean, not even if you don't even have to host Twitter Spaces, but if you're just interested in what are people talking about, where are people, just so many different points of data. I'm a geek, so I get into stuff like that, and Andrew's doing a great job.
And it's free, so you can't beat free.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if he's looking at monetizing it, because he probably could.
I imagine so. Yeah. Morgan, do you use his tool? Do you like it?
I do. I'm still learning about the things that it can do for me, but I often pop over and I'm impressed by the wealth of data there. And I know Andrew has been recording a lot of data, so it will be very interesting now that Spaces can live on, to have historical data and to be able to go back in time. But also, I generally just impressed with Andrew. He comes up with some very nice ideas, and if you talk to him in 1 week or another, he'll have a new, very good idea. And very quickly, we'll try and build it out. So it's really interesting to keep popping back and seeing what he's working on now.
Yeah, and he's really good about, just if you just follow his Twitter feed, he's always sharing pinned tweets in there of what he's working on. And he's been making YouTube videos showing either new features or features he's working on. So I've become a really big fan of his YouTube channel.
And he just is accessing so much data.
Right.
And information. I almost feel like at some point here, he's going to announce that he can tell what each person's toothpaste is that they use, or something like that. It's
Right.
like, where are you getting all this information? But with great power comes great responsibility, Andrew.
Right. The other piece of Spaces news to share today is something we've reported on several times in the past month or so. And Alessandro Paluzzi has been sharing some screenshots. He does the reverse engineering like Jane Wong does. It's super cool. They can uncover what is Twitter working on. And they've been working on this thing called Stations, where it looks like they're going to be incorporating podcasts with Spaces. And we've talked about it multiple times here before. But Alessandro shared a new tweet in the past week saying that they're continuing to work on Stations. And these screenshots look super interesting, but these are specifically having to do with Spaces. What do y'all think of this? Have y'all had a chance to look at this tweet and have any thoughts about this?
Morgan, you go first. I keep going first. I'll let you go first.
All right, okay. It looks like the implementation is improving, and I'm trying to tap on this now to have a quick look at So, for example, you can see on the second image, the Spaces community gathering. So what we're seeing is a space, but below that, you can see some play controls. You can see a skip to the next one and what looks like, going back to see the other ones that are available. So it does look like they're building in a player for audio that is more than just Spaces. I think there's some broader thoughts here, which I'd like to ask you about what this does for Spaces itself when you build in podcasts, and how that might change the kinds of Spaces that are made or people's listening behavior on the app.
Oh, man, I'm so glad you set me up for that, because I wanted to talk about that, because it seems like this could blur the line a lot between podcasts and Twitter Spaces, recorded Twitter Spaces, because, if you can load an RSS feed, or you could just, for example, I have a podcast, I'm not going to name drop it, but if I put my podcast on my profile, or that it is my podcast, and then you can subscribe to it from my profile, and then it shows up in these stations, and then you just use Twitter as a podcast player, but then also our Twitter Spaces that we host are showing up right alongside the podcast feed. And so I don't know, it depends on how they implement things, but this could be really cool and interesting. And it's keeping people on platform. You can play all the podcasts here instead of going to somewhere else.
That's such a good point. I mean, I think that's part of it, right? Keeping us on Twitter so we don't leave. I mean, look at all these features they've been adding. This notes feature looks amazing, where we're going to be able to have long form content right inside our Twitter feed. So much is happening that it's like going to be hard to leave Twitter. I think people are not going to be leaving. I'm really looking forward to this. I love podcasts. I would love to see this incorporation of podcasts and Spaces combined. The question is, how is this going to reside in our Twitter? Like, are these going to be all together? Like, is the Spaces tab going to turn into the Stations tab?
Yeah, so question for you and Suze, which is I know that you turned this space into a podcast. And if you keep doing that, would you keep the original space up as well, or would you rather the podcast version was the thing that showed up in people's tabs?
Boy, that's a good question. Never really thought about that. I mean, I guess I need to see, like, once something like this becomes available, how it's going to work, what can we do with it, and then decide at that point. But it definitely gets you thinking, right? I mean, it's so cool, so interesting. So that's it for our Spaces news. Next up, LinkedIn audio. I know we've talked about LinkedIn audio in the past here. I shared this tweet. Sajad had done a tweet in the past week, and I found it interesting because there's screenshots of, like, I haven't been in LinkedIn audio. I have not been able to join one live yet, and I really appreciated that he did these screenshots so I could see, like, what are these screens like? What, shows you how, when you're joining as a speaker, and then what the room looks like once you're in, and then when it ends. Have y'all been in many of these LinkedIn? Have you hosted one yourself?
I have been in a number of them, but I have not hosted any yet. That's something that's on the roadmap of things I'm going to be working on and doing and so on. But yeah, I'm clicking through these pictures here again real fast, and it has a similar look and feel to Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces. I think maybe a little bit more Clubhouse than Twitter Spaces as far as like the layout and the look of things, the size of the icons and so on. But LinkedIn does not have things like the nest or a pinned link on Clubhouse or anything like that. There are no options on LinkedIn Live Audio to have a co-host who has controls over bringing people onto stage. And in fact, you can't even, my understanding is you cannot invite people onto the stage who are in the audience. They have to raise their hand from the audience. And along with that, something a little different than what we've seen on other platforms, when they do raise their hand from the audience member's hand can be seen by everybody else in the audience. So, which I thought was an interesting dynamic when I was in one room, because it's like, okay, all these other people have their hand raised and want to go to the stage. I'm just not going to, so it's just another little dynamic there. But yeah, as of, I think it was last week or the week before, very recently, they have opened it up to most people who are LinkedIn Live Audio creator mode creators who have a minimum, I think, 150 followers, maybe a couple other things. Maybe Hoseline can explain later, or somebody else can. But most people in creator mode can host LinkedIn Live Audio events now. And I'll pass the mic.
Nice. Okay, that's good to know. Morgan, what are your thoughts on this?
So I've popped into a few, and they've been quite fun. But they've also been field trips. So it's people I know from Spaces who are over there. So Hoseline has been running some. Would be great to hear him later on, because I think he's sort of been doing it weekly. So yeah, I mean, the implementation looks pretty solid. There's a broader question about how people discover your audio events and what the dynamics on LinkedIn are. But it seems like one of the very positive things people have been saying is the experience of being able to run these on the web as well. So there's a desktop client. I haven't used that, so maybe Michael can talk about that. But apparently, for example, it's quite easy as a host to switch from the mobile client to the desktop client without any kind of hiccups. So I don't know if others have experienced that, but that's what I'm told at least.
It's pretty easy, and I haven't had experience with it recently. Maybe other people could speak to it when they come to the stage. But yeah, I mean, you can be in the room or event on mobile and then switch over to the desktop. I think just by joining it on the desktop, it boots you from the mobile into the desktop version. So it's nearly seamless. Yeah.
There's one other detail on the screenshot, which is very interesting to me, because one of the things from Clubhouse world that we think about often is how to implement blocking in social audio. And it's a very tricky and contentious subject. And it's interesting to see in this that LinkedIn's version is, and I'll read this out, if you've blocked someone on LinkedIn, they'll hear you, but they won't be able to see your name and profile picture. So they can still listen to what you're saying, but they can't, I assume, tell who it is that's speaking. So that's quite an interesting way to go.
Wow, that is interesting. And I see that Cindy Lou had tweeted out a comment to this saying, having both hosted and been a speaker in LinkedIn audio events, one needs to be somewhat creative in getting the news out about it. The creative use of invites and sharing as a post before the event helps to get more visibility. I just never get any kind of notice ahead of time. I always find out about them after the fact. So it's always frustrating for me. That's why I haven't been able to get on one live yet. And I would love to and see what it's all about.
Just stay tuned, everybody.
Exactly.
This is just getting going.
I know. It's still early days for that. A couple of interesting tweets I saw from Simon Hodgkins, who I see is here, and maybe in a few minutes when we take the mic request, he'll come speak to us. But just saw a few interesting things. This first one is a Twitter poll that's still active, by the way. You guys can all click on it and share your thoughts. But when I did this poll yesterday, the question is, the social audio battle seems to come down to two players, Twitter and LinkedIn. Not sure Clubhouse can gain more users or rekindle its mojo as competitors grow and add more functionality. Who wins the social audio battle? So as of right now, with 110 votes, is 69% Twitter Spaces, not surprise.
Let's get it to 125, folks. Let's go. 125 votes.
Right. 18% LinkedIn Live Audio, which is interesting. 8% Clubhouse and 4.5% other. Whoa. I am so surprised Clubhouse is so low. I know Simon is, big with social audio. So I'm sure the people who are doing this are people who are actively using social audio right now. So my takeaway is, are they all leaving Clubhouse? That's what it sure seems like here.
No, they're all on Twitter. They're doing a poll on Twitter, and they're mostly Twitter Spaces people. But yeah.
Oh, but plenty of Clubhouse people. No, but Clubhouse people are all over Twitter too. I mean, you can't tell me Clubhouse people don't ever come on Twitter.
We need Jason from Bunsen and Beaker to come up here and talk about the statistical probability of accuracy of the standard deviations of this thing to make sure that this is an accurate representation of something.
We need scientific input. Morgan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, firstly, the Twitter polls tend to heavily bias answers that are for Twitter. But I think that aside, like a bigger picture thing, which seems to be my catchphrase at the moment, is I don't think this is a battle, right? It's probably the wrong framing. I think these platforms will be good for different reasons, and some of those might be quite different to others. So you would go on LinkedIn for a specific kind of thing that you wouldn't really do on Spaces, maybe in the same way, and you probably wouldn't do on Clubhouse. So you select for the tool for the job, I suppose. And these will diverge. So I don't think it's a winner takes all thing, and I think there's room for more than one. It's a bit like asking who's going to win the video battle. Well, it just turns out that video becomes pretty common everywhere, and one place is good for one thing, another is good for another.
I would like to comment and say, it says, not sure Clubhouse can gain more users or rekindle its mojo. And I would say that keep an eye, everybody should keep an eye, and Simon's great, keep an eye on houses on Clubhouse, this beta that they're doing, because there is a lot of undercurrent and a lot of hubbub going on right now with houses, and this is the thing that Clubhouse is focused on. And every time they have their town halls, they're talking about, these are the features we're looking at, and it's updates for the houses beta. Like, they haven't really rolled out many new features to Clubhouse on the whole very much recently, or Morgan, maybe you could correct me, but the focus has been on these houses and the types of conversations and the way that even the rooms are formatted. And so I think we're starting to see not necessarily that one platform is winning over the other. They're just diverging and starting to kind of do more of their own thing in their own way.
Yes, there's one last point to make on that, and I think we're probably familiar, is that the vast majority of people have either never heard of social audio or haven't really tried it. So that last statistic is something like 2 to 3% of the US adult population. And this is a point where any way somebody can encounter social audio is great for the whole thing. So if someone learns about it on LinkedIn, that's really fantastic if they maybe wouldn't have done it elsewhere. and they can get a feel for it and then try other things too.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I love hearing y'all's thoughts on all this
We
stuff.
just want people to dip their toe in the social audio water, wherever it may
Yes,
be.
exactly. Give it a try. The other tweet I wanted to share from Simon, I thought this tweet was so interesting as well. He's saying, what if TikTok launches social audio? There were hints about audio-only live streams earlier this year, in addition to live video streaming. So with a predicted 1.8 billion, I said billion, 1.8 billion active monthly users by the end of the year, this could get interesting. Oh my gosh. I never even thought of this until I saw the tweet. What do y'all think of that? Can y'all imagine social audio on TikTok? Do you think that would just totally take over social audio because we know how big TikTok is right now?
I can imagine. I mean, we're at a point where TikTok is eating many people's lunches, and they're redoing their apps to try and make sure that that doesn't happen. The interesting thing with TikTok here is that it's not yet, at least, a follow graph, algorithmic recommendations. So it will be very different to social audio that we know on Spaces, which is really based around who you're following. And TikTok would, I think, if they did enter this space, do some really interesting work on the actual recommendation space. So I don't know how you would do that. It's a very, very different problem to doing it with video. With video, they can do things like completion rate, or look at what point in the video did you stop looking at the video, basically. And they can infer all sorts of things from that. But it's a very constrained thing to look at. I think that's really different when you're looking at an audio space that can go on for an hour or two, that is potentially very open-ended. What it's about can change a lot. It's really hard, I think, to apply the same kind of algorithmic stuff that TikTok are very good at to long-form audio. But I'd love to see them try it.
Yeah. Michael, what do you think?
This is where I admit that I don't know much about TikTok at all. I don't have an account. I've never downloaded it. I understand like people load like 15-second videos of them dancing and pointing at things or something. And this is just like the rave. But to me, it kind of seems like an app. If you took like ADHD and made an app, that's what TikTok is, maybe. And so I don't understand TikTok well enough. And so I guess like if they're going to do social audio and it's the short form video app, are they going to have short form speaking where like each person gets a 15-second timer to say what they're going to say, and then it goes to the next person? They only get 15 seconds. I don't know. I guess we'll just see how this plays out. And again, another social audio platform diverges and does its own thing.
I think it's more of a what if, because he framed this as a what if TikTok does this. I mean, he just said that there were hints of it earlier in the year. I'm not real big on TikTok, but just the fact that TikTok has a massive audience, even though it's a video app, a short form video app, but to have such an active audience, and we know everybody's familiar with social audio now these last 2 years. So would that help them if they decided to incorporate, any live stream video and or live stream audio? Like, you've got that active audience that's on there day and night. Would they gravitate to it?
Yeah. So the other angle on this is asynchronous versus live. And TikTok is majority asynchronous. So you're watching little clips of things. And they started to build live on top of that. Whereas I think it's kind of interesting that Spaces and Clubhouse started with live and then added in recording. So you add in asynchronous afterwards. So TikTok has quite a different, they're coming at it from the other direction. But I think it could be very interesting for them. This is another thing that they're trying to move into, is TikTok, as a kind of shopping destination as well. Without saying too much about that, this is where live can really help too, because as we know from, let's say, NFT spaces on Twitter, social audio can be quite a good way to give people context and motivate them to click on a link in the nest above. So if you can work out how to make that into also a shopping experience, God forbid that social audio becomes like the shopping channel or the QVC of audio, but I wouldn't put it past TikTok trying something like that down the line.
Yeah, it definitely makes for an interesting conversation. That's for sure. We have one last tweet. It's one of Michael's tweet that I want him to talk about. And
well, check the DMs real fast, because Alessandra actually tweeted something new here about that they keep working on stations for Twitter Spaces, and he has a picture of the redesigned homepage for Twitter Spaces and the stations. So it may be that we're going to be losing these purple and brown and blue cards for something a little bit simpler.
Which would be great because I can't stand it. I want something that's a little bit more appealing, especially mine when I'm promoting these rooms with just this ugly brown card. I hate it. I see this. I'm going to put in the nest real quick. We'll talk more about it next week because we're starting to get low on time. But yeah, thanks for throwing that in the DM real quick because that's super interesting. It never fails. Every week when Susan and I host this room in this 1 hour chat, something comes breaking out of Twitter or something that has to do with Twitter every time. So I'm not surprised. But yeah, we'll definitely break this down a little more next week. So what I want to do now is take the mic request. And while we're doing that, I have this tweet that Michael put out that I found super interesting yesterday, talking about simulcasting social audio. And I definitely want to hear your take on this, Michael. And while we're doing that, if you want to come chat with us, we definitely want to hear from you. Go ahead and request the mic so we can talk further. Definitely want to hear. Hopefully Simon can chat with us because those tweets of his were really interesting. But I got this tweet in the nest, Michael, that you put out. Talk to us about this. I want to hear your expanded thoughts. That's why I love social audio.
Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot. So back in December 4th of 2021, I hosted this room on Clubhouse called Social Audio, Where Will It Take You in 2022? And so it was kind of our predictions. It was our thoughts of 2021, but then our predictions for the next year. And it was just fun to kind of take a trip down memory lane because it was 8+ months ago, roundabout. So, it was time to take a look and see where things were going with 2022 and the predictions and so on. And I had a clip here, and I'll play, if it's all right with you, Madeline, I can play the audio from the clip so people can hear it in the room, or I can just have people listen on their own.
I would love that.
Okay, so I'll play this clip, and this is going to be funny to a lot of people because I did everything in moderation, simulchat on both Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces for several months. Shout out to Cindy Lou in the audience, or actually on stage now, who has been a wonderful co-host with that. But I had my hesitations on December 4th, 2021. Let's listen to that. I feel like I'm doing a disservice to each audience by doing that because of privacy concerns and maybe Victoria doesn't want her voice heard over on Twitter Spaces, or somebody on Twitter doesn't want their voice heard here on Clubhouse. And so that's my concern about doing stuff like that is if it's going to be a Clubhouse room, make it a Clubhouse room for that audience. If it's a Twitter space, make it for that audience. But the whole simulcasting thing, yeah, I just feel like that opens up a whole can of worms. But oh boy, I feel like I'm doing with it. I have to eat some crow on that one because a couple of months later, I started doing a simulchat, the simulcast, and it's been a positive experience. And I keep coming back to this word intention. And I think if you have the technology and you have the willingness to do a simulcast of whatever you're doing, then that's great. But be intentional and think about what the audience member on whatever platform you're simulcasting to is going to experience and how included they will feel in the whole program, the entire conversation, and that they're not playing just second fiddle to this other platform and you're just listening on Twitter Spaces or whatever. And I mentioned in that tweet, Jason from Bunsen and Beaker, who is doing a great job with the quadcasts he's doing on a bunch of platforms. If he wants to, he can speak to that. But I think, people know when they're on a platform, whether it's Clubhouse or Twitter or whatever, if it's being recorded, especially, that they're going to be heard by people live and on the recording. So
everywhere.
The simulcast thing is no big deal. I guess the one concern I would still have with a simulcast is if there's a platform where it's not being recorded or people don't know that this whole thing is being simulcasted or recorded, then that's kind of hairy. So I'll just leave it there because I know we're short on time. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing all that. I just thought this was really interesting and just wanted to hear your expanded thoughts. And thanks for playing it. I know you have the hardware to do that here in Spaces. I don't. So thank you. Hey, George, how's it going?
Hey, how are you? I just want to make a couple of points. I want to pull some authority here. I studied experimental design on the advanced graduate PhD level, and I can tell you absolutely that a poll taken about Twitter on Twitter versus Clubhouse and the others is a completely invalid poll. It's sampling bias at its worst, and it's about 6 other biases all together. I won't go into them, but it's absolutely invalid. That being said, I'm not surprised that Clubhouse was so low, even with the bias, because as I think it was Morgan mentioned, it's a feature, not a thing. It's not a standalone. It's like video. It's like it's the interactive live audio component. There's audio, which is like clips. There's live audio, like streaming. There's interactive live audio, people talking with each other in a conversation or in a serial interview or Q&A session, whatever. That's Spaces in Clubhouse. So it's that component, and every single one of them is going to have it because you kind of have to have it now. And, people are going to want to jump on. And even, I notice Slack has it. You can jump on a huddle with 2 or 3 other people on a Slack channel. And everybody's going to have it because it is so friggin' powerful. It is so powerful. And you can tell who people are and their authenticity and whether they know what they're talking about and their intelligence level and on and on and on in seconds, if not maybe minutes. And it brings everything to life. It's incredibly powerful. Been doing it for 52 years. And I'm telling you, the potential hasn't, I keep repeating this, and believe me, the potential, we've barely scratched the surface of the potential of this. There's so many ways it can be used that nobody is using it yet. That people have been using over 50 years with audio only sessions. So people are yet to discover the incredible power in classes and customer sessions and on and on and on. I don't want to take up more time. I just want to plant the seed that if you have not even begun to scratch the surface, so use some creativity, figure out ways this can be used, that it's an extremely resilient medium. It can't fall apart. It can't fall apart into side conversations. So because it's so resilient, all kinds of things, and because of the psychological safety, all kinds of things can be done that cannot be done any other way, like in face-to-face meetings or on Zoom meetings or anything like that. So, folks, unleash the creativity. You ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, thank you for sharing that, George. You always have great insights to share. Next up is Cindy Lou. Hey, Cindy Lou. Thanks for being here with us today.
George, you make me want to sing "We've Only Just Begun."
Yeah, we need a social audio theme song. Yeah.
And there's so many things I could say. Yeah, the poll was cute. I went over it though. I had to explore a little bit further. So I went over and I looked at Simon's following on Clubhouse and then his following here. And so the ratios are pretty close actually for a head-on-head. Although you really can't compare. And here's the thing. There are so many different ones. As George was saying, I'm just going to jump off from that point there and say, there's Entree, there's Club Connect, there's just Fireside. There's so many that are using audio and socially including people in their productions and their broadcasts or their conversations. It's like, what are you looking to do with audio? That's going to be the key.
Exactly.
That's going to tell you which platform you may want to look at first. And then second is going to be, who are you trying to reach? And are you already connected to them on any platform? And if you are, learn that platform's social audio and don't worry about the other ones, other than to connect with people and let them know what you're doing over on the other platforms. And yeah, it's such the beginnings, and it's so exciting to be here.
Exactly.
And I am glad that Michael and Morgan led me to you, Madeline.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And here's what's so interesting. So I'm looking at your Twitter feed. I see that you did 2 clips of this room in this past hour. And Spaces is doing it right. It works. It was not doing this yesterday. So I was playing with clips. I was playing with clips yesterday on web, and it just was not working properly. And I was racking my brain like, what am I doing wrong? I am looking at the ones you did today, just in the past hour here, one 16 minutes ago, one 40 minutes ago. I'm looking at it on the web. It is showing, I can see that if I just press the speaker button, this was not there yesterday. If I tap, the speaker's muted. If I tap it, now I can hear it. Is doing the 30 seconds and is showing you the transcript while it's playing, the captions while it's playing. That's new. It did not do this yesterday because I know otherwise. I know I'm not going crazy. Yesterday, this didn't happen. I just went back to the clip I did yesterday that is in my Twitter feed, and when I scroll down to it just now, it's working the same way. So Twitter must have flipped a switch to make it do this. So I'm very happy to see it's working properly now. Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.